The rope creaked softly from the ceiling beam as the young nurse hung upside down, her vision blurring, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. Blood rushed painfully to her head while the cold concrete floor of the warehouse spun beneath her. Somewhere nearby, boots scraped against metal and a cruel laugh echoed through the empty building. In that terrifying moment, Grace Holloway, a 24-year-old rookie nurse who had only wanted to help people, realized she had stepped into a nightmare she might not survive. Before we go further, take a moment to support stories that remind us kindness and courage still exist in this world. If you believe in compassion, second chances, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who loves emotional stories, and subscribe to the channel. Just 12 hours earlier, Grace had been finishing a quiet evening shift at a small community hospital in San Antonio, Texas. She was the kind of nurse who stayed late to comfort patients and wrote encouraging notes on paper cups for the night staff. Grace had moved to Texas only 6 months earlier after graduating from nursing school, determined to build a life helping others. Her coworkers often said she had the rare ability to make even the most frightened patient feel safe. That night had seemed normal until a man was rushed into the emergency room with a gunshot wound to the shoulder. The patient arrived unconscious, his clothes soaked with blood, and no identification except a small silver chain around his neck. Grace immediately joined the trauma team, pressing gauze against the wound while doctors worked to stabilize him. The staff assumed he was just another victim of the city's rising violence. But what Grace didn't know was that the wounded man was Marcus Calderon, a powerful cartel lieutenant whose enemies had ambushed him during a deal gone wrong. Within minutes of his arrival, armed men began searching for him across the city. Grace had stayed beside the unconscious patient longer than most nurses would have. She checked his vitals, adjusted his oxygen mask, and whispered calm reassurance even though he couldn't hear her. It was simply who she was. But someone had noticed. Just before dawn, as Grace walked to her car in the nearly empty hospital parking lot, a black SUV rolled silently beside her. Before she could react, 2 masked men grabbed her and forced her inside. The vehicle disappeared into the sleeping city before anyone realized she was gone. Now she hung upside down in an abandoned warehouse somewhere outside the city. The cartel boss responsible for the kidnapping, Victor Serrano, stood watching her with cold amusement. Serrano was a man feared across 2 countries, known for his ruthless methods and the quiet empire he had built through intimidation and violence. He believed Grace knew something she didn't. Serrano was convinced the hospital had secretly moved Marcus Calderon to protect him. Grace, being the last nurse seen treating him, had become the easiest target for answers. No matter how many times she tried to explain she knew nothing, Serrano refused to believe her. Hours passed slowly as dizziness overwhelmed her. Her arms trembled from the awkward position, and the world looked distorted from hanging upside down. The warehouse smelled of oil, rust, and dust. Every second felt heavier than the last. Yet even in that terrifying moment, Grace's mind drifted to the patients she had helped, the elderly woman who squeezed her hand during chemo treatments, the little boy who laughed when she gave him a superhero bandage. Those memories kept her from collapsing into despair. What Serrano didn't realize was that someone else had already started looking for her. Back at the hospital, Grace's coworker Olivia Carter, a veteran nurse who had become like an older sister to her, noticed Grace's car still sitting alone in the parking lot long after her shift ended. Olivia's instincts told her something was wrong. She alerted hospital security and contacted the police. Within hours, investigators discovered security footage showing the SUV pulling up beside Grace. But the situation escalated quickly when authorities realized the wounded patient Grace had treated was connected to a cartel network already under federal investigation. That's when the call went out to a special unit working quietly nearby. A Navy SEAL team conducting training exercises at a nearby base was temporarily assigned to assist federal agents in locating the missing nurse. Their team leader, Ethan Walker, a calm and focused 36-year-old officer with years of combat experience, immediately treated the mission as a priority. To him, this wasn't just another operation. An innocent civilian had been taken, and time was running out. Using surveillance data, vehicle tracking, and informants, investigators narrowed the search to several abandoned industrial buildings outside the city. Inside the warehouse, Grace's strength was fading. Her breathing grew shallow as the pressure in her head intensified. Serrano paced nearby, growing impatient. The silence of the building made every sound echo sharply, the drip of water from a pipe, the scrape of boots, the distant hum of highway traffic miles away. Then suddenly, something changed. Outside the warehouse, several unmarked vehicles rolled quietly to a stop in the darkness. Ethan Walker and his SEAL team moved into position with silent precision. They studied the building's layout, noting the entrances and weak points. Infrared cameras confirmed multiple armed men inside. And one person hanging from the ceiling. Walker gave a brief nod. Within seconds, everything exploded into motion. The warehouse door burst open with a thunderous crash as the SEALs stormed inside. Flashlights sliced through the darkness while commands echoed sharply across the room. Cartel guards scrambled in confusion, their confidence shattered by the sudden, overwhelming force. Serrano barely had time to react before chaos erupted around him. From Grace's upside-down view, the scene looked surreal, dark figures moving swiftly, beams of light cutting across the dusty air, and the sharp thud of boots racing across the concrete floor. Then someone reached her. A strong pair of hands quickly secured the rope, lowering her carefully before cutting her free. As the world slowly flipped back into its proper direction, Grace collapsed into the arms of the SEAL who had rescued her. Her head pounded, but the terrifying pressure began to ease. For the first time in hours, she felt safe. Within minutes the warehouse was secured and the cartel members were taken into custody. Serrano's empire of fear had finally cracked under the weight of his own arrogance. Outside, as the first light of morning spread across the Texas sky, Grace sat wrapped in a warm blanket beside a medical vehicle. Her hands still trembled slightly, but she was alive. Ethan Walker stood nearby, quietly watching the sunrise. When Grace finally looked up at him, her exhausted eyes filled with gratitude. She had survived a night she would never forget. But what stayed with her most wasn't the fear. It was the realization that courage sometimes appears in unexpected forms, an observant coworker who refuses to ignore a missing friend, investigators who refuse to stop searching, and strangers willing to risk everything to save a life they've never met. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to support it. Like the video, share it with someone who believes in bravery and kindness, and subscribe for more stories that remind us humanity still shines in the darkest moments. And before we reach the ending, I have a small request for you. Write the word hope in the comments if you believe courage and compassion can still change the world. Weeks later, Grace returned to the same hospital where her nightmare had begun. The hallways looked exactly the same, yet everything felt different. Every patient she helped reminded her that life is fragile, but also incredibly resilient. The experience could have broken her. Instead, it strengthened her. Grace continued her work as a nurse, carrying the quiet courage of that night with her. Because sometimes the people who seem the most ordinary, like a rookie nurse who only wanted to help others, become the center of a story that proves humanity is stronger than fear. And if this story moved you, please like, comment, and share it. Your support helps keep these powerful stories alive and reaching people who might need a little hope today.